She rushed her son to the ER. But the doctor was her ex, and the father he never knew. I know you're here for an amazing story, but before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to today's story. The minutes stretched into what felt like hours as Sarah sat in the waiting area, her mind spinning. She couldn't help but glance over at David every few seconds. The man who had been such a huge part of her life, the man who had left without a word, was now standing in front of her, saving their son's life. It didn't feel real. How could this be happening? Why hadn't he known about Liam? Why had she kept him a secret all these years? The questions swirled in her head, but there was no time to ask them now. Liam was the only thing that mattered. As Sarah sat there, she watched David move seamlessly between the nurses and the equipment. His movements were sure and steady, a professional through and through. And yet, she couldn't shake the feeling that he was more than just the doctor in the room. He was a stranger. A stranger who knew nothing about the boy lying in that bed, fighting for his life. Sarah's thoughts were interrupted when a nurse came into the room and spoke in a quiet voice. "He's stable for now," she said, glancing at Sarah. "But we'll need to monitor him closely for the next few hours." Sarah nodded, her breath catching in her throat. She couldn't breathe until she heard those words. "Stable. For now." "Thank you," she whispered, almost too quietly for the nurse to hear. The nurse gave a soft smile before leaving the room, and Sarah was left alone once more, her heart heavy with 1,000 different emotions. The door to the treatment room opened, and David walked back in. He seemed calm, but Sarah could see the tension in his jaw. "We're going to keep him here overnight for observation," David said. His voice was steady, but there was an edge of something else there, something softer. Sarah felt a strange pang of longing in her chest. For a moment, she wanted to ask him everything: why he left, why he never came back, why he hadn't been there for Liam. But she didn't. There was no time for that now. "Is there anything else?" Sarah asked, her voice strained. David shook his head, then looked at her with a seriousness that made her chest tighten. "I'm sorry, Sarah," he said, his eyes holding a depth she hadn't seen in years. "I should have been there. For you, for Liam. I never knew." Sarah blinked, taken aback. She had expected many things from this moment, but not this. Not an apology from him. She took a breath, trying to keep her composure. "It's not your fault," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I never told you. I didn't want you to have to carry that." David nodded slowly, his expression hardening with a new resolve. "We'll fix that," he said, his tone firm. "We'll make things right." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. She wasn't sure if she was ready for him to be back in her life. She wasn't sure if she was ready for him to be part of Liam's life. But there was no turning back now. "I'll stay," David continued, his voice softer now. "I'll be here for Liam, for both of you." His words were comforting, but they also frightened her. She had built her life without him. She had learned to live without him. But now, here he was, ready to step back in. Sarah looked at him for a long moment, her emotions a whirlwind. How could she trust him again? How could she let him back into her life when everything had been so different since he left? "Thank you," she said quietly, her eyes finally meeting his. David's gaze softened, and for the first time, Sarah saw the man she had once loved, the man who had disappeared all those years ago, the man who was now offering his help, his presence, the man who, for reasons beyond her understanding, was willing to be part of Liam's life now. They stood there in the quiet, the weight of unspoken words between them. Sarah didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for sure. Things would never be the same again. And as she turned her attention back to Liam, her heart heavy with uncertainty and hope, she couldn't help but wonder, was this the beginning of something new? Or was it just a fleeting moment of old emotions colliding with new realities? It had been hours since David first arrived, and Sarah had barely left Liam's side. The hospital room felt suffocating, filled with a quiet that was only broken by the occasional beep of the machines monitoring her son's vitals. Her mind was still spinning, caught between disbelief and the need to focus on what truly mattered, Liam's health. The weight of the past hung over her, but for the first time in years, she found herself considering what it would mean to have David back in her life, in Liam's life. She had always kept him at a distance, protecting herself and their son from the hurt he had left behind when he walked away. Now, here he was, a stranger and yet so familiar, stepping in as if nothing had changed. She wasn't sure how she felt about it. Was it too late to heal old wounds? Or was this some kind of second chance? Sarah glanced over at David, who was speaking to a nurse outside the room. His movements were calm, professional, but there was an underlying urgency in his eyes, a sign that he was just as shaken by the situation as she was. He returned to the room shortly after, his expression softened. "How's he doing?" Sarah asked, her voice shaky despite her best efforts to stay strong. "He's stable for now," David replied, his voice gentle. "We'll need to monitor him through the night, but I think he'll be all right." Relief washed over Sarah, but it was tempered with a deep sense of unease. Liam's condition might be stable, but the tension between her and David was far from it. She watched him, noticing the small changes in his demeanor. It was hard to believe that the man who had been so absent from her life was now the one caring for their son, the one offering comfort in a moment when she least expected it. "Thank you," she said softly, almost as an afterthought. David looked at her, his gaze softening, and for a brief moment, Sarah saw the man she had once loved. But that man was also the same one who had left her alone, who had never known about Liam. Her heart ached at the thought, but she didn't have time for it now. She had to focus on Liam, on the life that was just beginning to unfold before her. "I know this is difficult," David said, breaking the silence, "for both of us. But I'm here, Sarah. I'm here for Liam. I'm not going anywhere." Sarah didn't know how to respond. She wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that he truly meant what he said, but the past had taught her to be cautious. Still, something in his voice made her want to give him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe this was the chance they never had. Maybe, after all these years, they could finally have the family they were supposed to be. "I don't know if I can trust you again," Sarah admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "After everything that happened, leaving me, leaving him." David took a step closer, his expression sincere. "I understand. I know I don't have the right to ask for your trust, but I'm asking anyway. I know I can't change the past, but I want to be here for you and Liam. I want to be the father he deserves." There it was, the truth she had been avoiding for so long. He was offering what he had never been able to before, a chance to be part of their lives. Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, her emotions swirling inside her. She had spent so long pretending that she didn't need him, that she didn't need anyone. But now, with Liam in the hospital and David standing in front of her, she couldn't ignore the pull of what might have been. "I'm scared," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can open myself up to you again." David reached out, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to do this alone," he said quietly. "You have me, and you have Liam. We'll figure this out together." Sarah looked at him, seeing the sincerity in his eyes. For the first time, she wondered if maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something new. Maybe they could rebuild what was broken, piece by piece. "Okay," she said, her voice steady for the first time in hours. "We'll figure this out, together." And for the first time in a long while, Sarah allowed herself to believe in the possibility of a future where the past no longer controlled them. It wouldn't be easy. And she didn't know where this road would take them. But for Liam's sake, and for her own, she was willing to try. As she sat back down beside Liam's bed, holding his small hand in hers, Sarah realized that this was only the beginning of a long journey, a journey that would require trust, forgiveness, and most of all, love. And maybe, just maybe, this time, they could get it right. The days that followed were a blur of doctors, nurses, and constant checkups for Liam. Sarah stayed by his side, only leaving when necessary, but her thoughts were always consumed by the same question. Was this really the beginning of something new? Or was it just another fleeting moment in a life full of uncertainty? David was there, every step of the way. He kept his word. He stayed. But as each day passed, Sarah found herself wondering more and more about his true intentions. Was he genuinely trying to make things right? Or was he just trying to fix the mess he had left behind? She didn't know if she could fully trust him again. But one thing was clear, he was giving everything he could for their son. And for now, that was enough. One afternoon, David showed up at the hospital with a bouquet of flowers in hand. His face lit up with a warmth that Sarah hadn't seen in years. He was still the man she had once known, but now he seemed different, softer, more thoughtful. He placed the flowers on Liam's bedside table and took a seat beside Sarah, his eyes not leaving the boy's fragile form. "How's he doing today?" David asked, his voice low, almost as if afraid to disturb the fragile peace that had settled over the room. "Better," Sarah replied, her voice strained but hopeful. "He's awake a little more now, and he's talking more, which is a good sign." David nodded, his gaze never leaving Liam. "I'm glad to hear that. He's a strong kid. Just like his mom," he said, his words soft but full of meaning. Sarah's heart skipped a beat at his words. She wasn't used to hearing David speak like that, so tenderly, so genuinely. It felt like a step forward, and yet, Sarah couldn't ignore the nagging fear that lingered at the back of her mind. What if this was all too good to be true? "I'm sorry, Sarah," David said suddenly, breaking the silence. "I know I can't erase the past, but I want to be here for you. For Liam. I know I've made mistakes, but I want to make things right, if you'll let me." Sarah looked at him, her heart torn between the desire to forgive and the fear of being hurt again. She had spent so many years on her own, raising Liam, keeping him safe, never once thinking that David would be a part of their lives again. But now, here he was, trying to make up for lost time. Could she really allow him back in? Could she trust him with their son? "I don't know if I can trust you again," Sarah said quietly, the weight of the words heavy in the room. David looked at her, his expression full of regret. "I understand. I don't expect you to just forgive me. But I'm here, Sarah. I want to be part of Liam's life. I want to be part of your life." His voice cracked slightly, and for the first time in a long while, Sarah saw the vulnerability in him. It wasn't the confident, unshakable man he had once been. It was a man who had been through a lot and was now reaching out, hoping for a second chance. She closed her eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy, but maybe, just maybe, it was worth trying. "I don't know how this is going to work," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But we can try, for Liam's sake." David's face lit up with a mixture of relief and joy. "Thank you, Sarah. I won't let you down." Over the next few days, Sarah and David spent more time together. They really talked about their past, their mistakes, and their hopes for the future. Sarah found herself slowly letting go of the anger and hurt that had been buried inside for so long. David wasn't the same person he had been when he left. He had changed, just like she had. And maybe, just maybe, they could build something new, something stronger this time. Liam continued to improve, and with each passing day, the bond between Sarah and David grew stronger. They began to function as a family again, but this time, it was different. There was a tenderness between them, a new sense of respect and understanding. They weren't rushing into anything, they were taking their time, one step at a time. And for the first time in a long time, Sarah allowed herself to believe in the possibility of a future where they could all be together. It wasn't going to be easy, and there would be challenges along the way. But with Liam's health improving and their relationship slowly mending, Sarah felt a sense of hope that she hadn't felt in years. Maybe they could get it right this time. As the days went on, Sarah and David began to settle into a new routine. Liam's recovery was slow but steady, and with each small improvement, Sarah found herself relaxing just a little bit more. She no longer felt the constant knot of anxiety in her chest, the one that had been there for days as she had watched over Liam, fearing the worst. Now, she could see the light at the end of the tunnel. David, too, seemed more at ease. He was at the hospital every day, spending hours with Liam, talking to him, helping him eat, and keeping him company. For the first time in a long while, Sarah felt like they were starting to function as a family again. But this time, things felt different. David was no longer the man who had walked out on her. He wasn't the man who had left her to raise their son alone. Now, he was here, trying, showing up, and being there for both her and Liam. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. One evening, after another long day at the hospital, David offered to take Sarah out for a walk. The hospital was bustling with activity, but it was quiet outside, the air crisp with the promise of an early spring. They walked slowly, side by side, not saying much, but the silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was a kind of peace they hadn't shared in years. "How's he doing today?" Sarah asked, glancing up at David. "Better?" he replied, his voice softer than usual. "He's still weak, but I think we're getting there." They walked in silence for a few more minutes, each lost in their own thoughts. Finally, David broke the quiet. "I know this isn't easy," he said, his voice full of sincerity. "For you, for Liam, for me. But I want you to know, I'm not going anywhere." Sarah turned to look at him, the words hanging in the air. She wasn't sure how to respond. She had spent so many years alone, convincing herself that she didn't need anyone. And yet, here was David, offering the one thing she never thought she'd get from him: commitment. "I know you're scared," he continued, his gaze meeting hers. "I can see it. And I don't expect you to just trust me overnight. But I'm willing to work for it. For you, for Liam. I want to be part of your lives again. I want to be the father he deserves." Sarah's heart fluttered at his words. But the wall she had built around herself didn't come down that easily. The hurt from the past was still there, lingering in the corners of her mind, a reminder of the pain she had carried for so long. "I don't know if I can believe you," Sarah admitted, her voice a whisper. "You left once. How do I know you won't do it again?" David stopped walking and turned to face her. His expression was earnest, almost desperate. "Because I'm here now," he said softly. "I'm not going anywhere. I can't change the past, but I can show you that I'm not the same person. I've changed. I want to prove that to you. And to Liam." Sarah took a deep breath, her heart heavy with the weight of his words. Could she trust him again? Could she let go of the fear that had held her back for so long? She didn't have all the answers, but she knew that right now, she needed to take a leap of faith, if only for Liam's sake. "I'm not sure how this is going to work," she said, her voice still uncertain. "But we'll figure it out, together." David's face lit up with relief, and for the first time, Sarah saw the man she had once loved, the man who had been a stranger for so long. But now, maybe, he could be something more. "Thank you, Sarah," he said, his voice full of gratitude. "We'll take it slow, one step at a time, and I'll be here every step of the way." Sarah nodded, her heart lighter than it had been in days. It wasn't going to be easy. There would be times when the past would try to creep in, when the hurt and the fear would make everything feel impossible. But for the first time in a long time, Sarah allowed herself to believe in the possibility of a future one where they could all be together, a family again. Liam's recovery continued to progress, and with each passing day, Sarah and David found themselves inching closer to a place of healing, both for themselves and for their son. There were no guarantees, no promises that everything would be perfect, but for the first time in years, Sarah felt a flicker of hope, hope that maybe, just maybe, this time, they could get it right. Weeks passed, and slowly but surely, things began to settle into a new rhythm. Liam was getting stronger each day, and with his recovery, Sarah felt a sense of peace that she hadn't known in a long time. There were still moments of doubt, times when the walls she had built around herself threatened to come up again. But each time David was there, patiently proving that he was willing to try, willing to be part of their lives. The man he was now seemed so different from the one who had left. It wasn't just the way he showed up every day for Liam, or how he helped with the smallest things, like picking up groceries or running errands. It was the way he treated Sarah now, with respect, with kindness. He wasn't demanding forgiveness. He was earning it, one small act at a time. Sarah couldn't deny that she was starting to let go of some of the anger that had kept her distant for so long. She watched David interact with Liam, watched the way he gently coaxed him into eating his meals, the way he stayed calm when Liam would throw tantrums over small things. For the first time, she saw David not just as the man who had hurt her, but as a father, Liam's father. There were moments, though, when Sarah would catch herself. She'd look at David, at the way he was taking responsibility for their son, and wonder if this was just temporary, if he was just trying to fix things for a moment and would soon leave again. But every time that thought crept in, David would do something that reassured her. He'd stay up late talking with Liam when he couldn't sleep, or he'd text her during the day to ask how things were going, even when he was busy with work. He was trying, and Sarah found herself starting to believe in that effort, starting to believe in him again. One evening, after dinner, David suggested they go out for a walk in the park. It had become their new tradition, quiet moments like these, where they could talk without the interruptions of the hospital or the stresses of their day-to-day lives. Sarah agreed, and they walked side by side, their pace slow, not rushing, simply enjoying each other's company. "How's he doing today?" Sarah asked, glancing up at David. "Better. He's getting stronger. His appetite is coming back. And his energy's picking up. He's getting back to being the little guy he was before all this happened." David's voice was warm, but there was something else in his eyes, a sense of hope, of pride, even. Sarah smiled, feeling a rush of relief. Seeing Liam healthy, seeing him laugh again, was the most important thing. But watching David become a part of that healing was something she hadn't expected. It was like she was finally seeing the man she had once known, the one who cared, the one she had fallen in love with. And now, with Liam in the picture, it felt like everything was coming full circle. "I'm glad," she said softly. "He deserves to be happy again. We both do." David looked at her, his gaze lingering. "We'll get there," he said. "Together." And for the first time, Sarah believed him. They didn't know what the future would hold. There were still so many uncertainties. But the past few weeks had shown her that with time, with effort, and with a little bit of hope, things could change. They could change for the better. The night grew colder as they continued their walk, but neither of them seemed to notice the chill in the air. The world around them seemed to fade, and for a moment, it felt like it was just the three of them, Sarah, David, and Liam. A family, healing together. Sarah wasn't sure how this was going to work, how they were going to rebuild the trust that had been broken. But she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't facing it alone anymore, and maybe that was enough. She was starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, the future wasn't as scary as she thought. Maybe, this time, things would be different. As they made their way back to the house, David reached out, gently brushing her hand with his. It was a small gesture, but it felt like the most natural thing in the world. They didn't need to say anything. The connection was there, growing stronger every day, and for the first time in a long time, Sarah allowed herself to believe in the possibility of a future where they could all be together, a family again. And maybe that was the beginning of something beautiful. The days passed by slowly, each one filled with small but significant steps toward healing. Liam continued to get stronger, and with each improvement, Sarah felt a weight lifting off her shoulders. She had spent so many sleepless nights in fear, her mind racing with worry about what would happen to her son. But now, with him recovering steadily, she could breathe a little easier. The moments of doubt still came when she would see David smiling at Liam, or offering to help her with things she never expected him to. Those old fears would creep back in. Could she really trust him again? Could she let go of the hurt from the past? But every time those thoughts surfaced, David was there, showing her, little by little, that he was truly committed to being a part of their lives. He wasn't just trying to fix things for a moment. He was in this for the long haul. He was trying to make up for lost time, not just with Liam but with Sarah as well. One evening, after dinner, Sarah found herself staring out the window, watching the sun set behind the horizon. It was a quiet evening, the kind of evening where everything felt calm, but her mind was racing again. She had been thinking a lot about the future, about what came next. Could they rebuild a life together? Could they truly be a family again after everything that had happened? She felt a tap on her shoulder, and when she turned, David was standing there, a small smile on his face. "Hey," he said softly. "You okay?" Sarah smiled faintly, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Just thinking," she replied. "About what?" he asked, stepping closer, his voice gentle but curious. She sighed and turned back to the window. "About us. About how we move forward from here. It feels like things are getting better, but I still don't know how to let go of the past, how to forgive everything that happened." David stood beside her, looking out the window as well. For a moment, there was silence between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was like they both needed the space to think. Finally, David spoke again, his voice quiet but filled with determination. "I know I hurt you, Sarah," he said. "I know I wasn't there when you needed me the most, and I'll never be able to change that. But what I can do is show you, every day, that I'm not the same person anymore. I'm here for you, for Liam, and I want to be part of your lives for the long run. I want to prove that I can be the man you need me to be." Sarah felt a lump form in her throat at his words. She wanted to believe him. She really did. But after everything they had been through, after so many years of being on her own, it was hard to let go of the walls she had built around her heart. "I don't know if I can just forgive and forget," she said softly. "I don't know if I can forget the pain, the loneliness, everything that happened when you left." David reached out, placing a hand gently on her arm. His touch was warm, reassuring. "I'm not asking you to forget, Sarah," he said. "I'm asking you to give me a chance to show you that I can be better, that we can be better, that we can have a future together, if you're willing to try." Sarah looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time, she didn't see the man who had walked away. She saw the man who was standing in front of her now, the man who had been through his own battles, the man who was trying, who was willing to fight for them. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, she wasn't as afraid of it. Maybe they could figure this out. Maybe they could rebuild what was broken, piece by piece. "Okay," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "We'll try. For Liam. For us." David's face lit up, relief and joy flooding his expression. He stepped closer, his hand still resting gently on her arm. "Thank you, Sarah," he said. "We'll take it slow, I promise, one step at a time." And as Sarah stood there, looking at David, she realized that this was the beginning of something new. It wouldn't be easy, there would be challenges along the way, but they had time. They had time to heal, to rebuild, and maybe, just maybe, they had time to create the family they had always dreamed of. For the first time in a long time, Sarah allowed herself to believe that the future didn't have to be defined by the mistakes of the past. It could be something better. Together. The weeks that followed were filled with small but significant changes. Sarah and David were taking things one day at a time, slowly rebuilding the connection they had once shared. Liam continued to get stronger, his laughter returning more often, filling the house with the sound of joy that Sarah had almost forgotten. There were moments of doubt, of course, when Sarah would catch herself wondering if she was doing the right thing. Could she really trust David again? Could they really rebuild their family? Or was this all just an illusion? But every time those doubts crept in, David was there, steady and unwavering. He was there for Liam, for her. And with each passing day, Sarah saw the man he had become, the man she had always hoped he would be. One evening, after a particularly long day at work, Sarah sat down at the kitchen table, staring at the stack of papers in front of her. She had been juggling so many things, Liam's recovery, her work, and trying to keep everything together that she hadn't noticed how exhausted she had become. David walked in, noticing her tired expression. He didn't say anything at first. Instead, he walked over and placed a cup of tea in front of her. "You're working too hard," he said, his voice gentle. "You need to rest." Sarah smiled faintly, feeling a wave of warmth spread through her at the sight of him. "I'm fine," she said, but there was no conviction in her voice. David didn't argue. Instead, he pulled up a chair beside her and sat down. "Let me help," he said simply. "What can I do?" Sarah hesitated for a moment, but then she realized how much she had been holding on to, how much she had been trying to do alone. She had spent so many years convincing herself that she didn't need anyone, but now, with David by her side, she felt a sense of relief she hadn't expected. "You could help me with the bills," she said, her voice soft. "I've been trying to keep up with everything, but it's just a lot." David nodded immediately, his expression serious. "Of course," he said, "we'll go through it together." And so they did. For the first time in a long time, Sarah didn't feel like she had to carry the weight of everything on her own. David was there, supporting her, and they were working together. It wasn't just about fixing the past or rebuilding their family, it was about creating something new, something stronger. Later that evening, after Liam had gone to bed, Sarah and David sat on the couch together, the space between them feeling more comfortable than it had in years. They didn't need to say much. They were simply there for each other, the silence between them no longer awkward but filled with understanding. "I know it hasn't been easy," David said quietly, breaking the silence. "But I'm glad we're doing this. I'm glad we're doing this together." Sarah looked at him, her heart swelling with emotion. She had never expected to be here, sitting on this couch with David, not after everything that had happened. But somehow, they had found their way back to each other. "Me too," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I didn't think I could forgive you. I didn't think I could let go of all the hurt, all the anger. But I'm starting to see that maybe we can do this. Maybe we can be a family again." David's eyes softened, and he reached out, taking her hand in his. "We will be," he said, his voice filled with conviction. "It's not going to be perfect. There will be challenges, but I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. We'll take it one step at a time, and we'll build something better, together." Sarah squeezed his hand, feeling the weight of his words settle in her heart. She didn't have all the answers. There was still so much to work through, so much to rebuild. But for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to believe that they could make it. Maybe the future wasn't as scary as she had thought. Maybe, just maybe, they could have the life they had always dreamed of. As Sarah looked at David, she realized that this was a new beginning for all of them. It wouldn't be easy, but they had already come so far. And with each day, they would continue to grow, to heal, and to build a future full of hope, love, and the possibility of second chances. As the months passed, things slowly but surely started to fall into place. Liam was thriving, his energy returning with each day. Sarah couldn't remember the last time she had felt this much peace in her life. The tension, the uncertainty that had plagued her for so long, was finally starting to fade. It wasn't just about Liam's health improving. It was about everything: her relationship with David, the rebuilding of trust, the hope for a future that no longer felt out of reach. David had proven, time and time again, that he was here to stay. He wasn't just a presence in Liam's life. He was fully invested in her life as well. They had made progress, and each step forward was a victory. But as Sarah looked back on everything they had been through, she realized that the road they had walked was far from easy. There had been moments of doubt, times when the past threatened to overwhelm them. But in the end, they had found their way back to each other. Slowly, Sarah allowed herself to hope again, to believe in the possibility of a future that was better than the past. One afternoon, after a long week of work, Sarah and David took Liam to the park. It was a beautiful day, the kind where the sun was warm but not too hot, and the air was fresh. They walked hand in hand, with Liam running ahead, his laughter filling the air. It was moments like these, small and simple, that made Sarah realize just how much they had come to appreciate each other. "He's growing up so fast," David said, watching Liam chase after a ball. Sarah nodded, a smile tugging at her lips. "I know. It feels like just yesterday he was a little baby in my arms." David's voice softened. "He's lucky to have you," he said quietly. Sarah's heart fluttered at his words. She wasn't used to hearing David speak like this, so open, so vulnerable. "I'm lucky to have him," she replied, her voice full of emotion. "And I'm lucky to have you." David stopped walking and turned to face her, his eyes searching hers. "Sarah," he said, his voice full of sincerity, "I know things haven't been easy, and I know we've both made mistakes. But I want you to know that I'm here. I'm here for you, and I'm here for Liam, and I'm never going anywhere." Sarah's heart swelled with emotion as she looked at him. This wasn't the man who had walked away all those years ago. This was a man who had come back, who had worked to prove that he was worthy of her trust, worthy of their family. She could see it now, more clearly than ever. She wasn't alone anymore. "I believe you," Sarah whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I believe in us." And with those words, it felt like something shifted inside her. The weight of all the past hurt, the doubts that had kept her from fully trusting David, began to lift. She could see a future now, one where they all worked together, where they were a family again, stronger and more united than ever before. They walked home together that day, the sun beginning to set behind them, casting a warm glow over the world. It was a peaceful moment, one that felt like everything had come full circle. Sarah knew the road ahead wouldn't always be easy, but for the first time in a long time, she felt ready to face whatever came their way. She had David by her side, and she had Liam. And that was all she needed. The past didn't have to define their future. They had the power to create something better, something filled with love, trust, and the kind of family they had always dreamed of. As they walked back into their home, Sarah glanced at David, and for the first time, she didn't feel the weight of the past on her shoulders. She felt light, free. They had made it. And now, they could begin again, together. In this heartfelt and emotional tale of love, second chances, and the healing power of family, we dive deep into the journey of Sarah and David as they navigate the challenges of rebuilding their family after years of separation. Sarah, a devoted mother, finds herself torn between past hurts and the possibility of a future with David, the father of her son Liam. As Liam recovers from a serious illness, Sarah and David slowly rediscover each other, learning to trust and love again, while navigating the complexities of parenthood and forgiveness. This is not just another typical romantic story, but one filled with lessons about personal growth, the power of forgiveness, and the importance of family. Just like many times millionaire stories asterisk, where lives are changed unexpectedly, Sarah and David's journey proves that love and family can heal even the deepest wounds. Through their story, you'll experience the highs and lows of their emotional journey, as they learn to rebuild their trust, face their fears, and ultimately find happiness again. In true millionaire stories times fashion, their journey reminds us that no matter how tough life can get, redemption and second chances are always possible. Discover how Sarah and David find their way back to each other, with the hope that no matter what challenges arise, they will always be a family. Like all great millionaire stories asterisk, the lessons they learn will inspire you to believe in second chances and the power of starting over. Tune into this emotional roller coaster as Sarah and David learn that love can triumph over the toughest of pasts, proving that sometimes the best parts of life are the second chances we never saw coming.